So I graded all of the elementary school pumpkins that we did this year, and I just wanted to share some of the information I found with you guys. So these are all subjectively graded, just my opinion, but it's based off of what level of step they got to in the pumpkin. So there's a little bit of method to the madness here. So I went through all the 108 pumpkins, and we're trying to find out what caused them to be good and bad, and some ideas how to make it better for next year. So these were all the grade A pumpkins here. So you can see some of them turned out really phenomenal. This was 28% of carvings, which is great. I'd like to see that number get higher and higher each year. And one of the interesting things that we found out was that the animal stencils and organic shapes in general did better in this category as opposed to cartoon pumpkins. And part of the reason for that is like if you look at the horse head there, you'll see that the hair isn't perfectly matching to the stencil, but it doesn't matter because you can't tell. One of the cool things with the animals is that even if you screw it up a little bit with a face, it will still look like a horse, even if it's not that exact horse. Whereas if you're doing a portrait of someone's face and you make a mistake, then it's more of a big deal because you won't be able to tell that it's the same person that you're trying to carve. So the biggest point of failure here was smoothing out the pumpkin. So that's like the final step essentially. And you can see like on the Kool-Aid man there, it turned out really well. However, they didn't quite have it smoothed out over the thing. So that's why they're an A and not an A plus. Yeah, we'll move on to the next one here. So these were all the B pumpkins. So these ones are pretty good. We had, as you can see, 39% of the carvings here. Cartoons and organic, they indexed equally. So we had more cartoon pumpkins than we had animal pumpkins to begin with. But yeah, compared to what you'd expect, these were about average here. So these things really where it turned out to be the fail point with these ones is with the first step of carving with the V tool, the wood carving V tool, and getting the lines all correct. So this is something that we're going to have to spend a lot more time with the teaching and get the kids more proficient with this. So getting that first outlining step with the tool is really essential to make this all churn out. You can see with that Bowser one in the very middle of this, the 9 photos here, you can tell that it's Bowser, the Mario character, but it's a lot of straight lines as opposed to rounded lines as we'd like to see. So that's sort of what you're looking at there. And on the first slide, if we go back there, you'll be able to see the koi fish. Now, we've got another koi fish here that another student did. It also looks good, and it would look even better if we were to clean up those black lines around the edge. But you can tell a lot of the detail was lost here because they weren't quite as good at keeping all of the detail with that first initial V-tool step. So I'll move on to the next one here. This is where we look at, and we need some quite a bit of improvement here. So the first step here, these C plus ones, a lot of these were inverted. So there was a lot of different fail points here. Luckily, this is only 31% of carvings, which is pretty good. So most of the pumpkins turned out B or A, which is excellent. And I'd like to see these get better, and I think we can. So this one here, a lot of these, the cartoons were over-indexed for this. So more than what you'd expect. And I think the biggest drawback with the cartoons is that there's a lot of fine lines that the students need to keep on the pumpkin. So it's a very thin line of pumpkin skin. And when they mess that up, unfortunately, it makes it easy for this to get inverted. So those top ones, you can see the image was inverted. They just left it as an outline instead of going the full way out. Like if you see that minion on the right with the C plus there at the top, they inverted the mouth, and then once they inverted the mouth, they did the opposite. So they were supposed to carve out the teeth instead of the outside of the mouth. And once they messed that up, then they're sort of stuck as to, okay, now what do I do? So they just left it as the outline. You can still tell it's a minion, but it didn't quite churn out quite as well. And the last one there, you can see the C minus. That's just my subjective standard here. They did an excellent job, but they didn't follow the steps. So instead of doing all of the outlining first and then taking off the skin, they just did it piece by piece, and they started taking off all the skin, which looked excellent, but they didn't have time to finish. So this would have looked better if they had just completed the outline and they didn't take the rest of the skin off. You would be able to tell what it is better, and it would look better. So these are some things we need to think about in terms of changing our procedures so that the students complete the steps correctly. Lastly here, there was only 2 pumpkins, which turned out to be less than 2% of the pumpkins here that really failed at the task with this. Now, I want to commend the one here that did this bottom pumpkin. Actually, their attitude was amazing. So they sort of were dealing with some very difficult thin lines, like I was describing the last slide, and they made a mistake, got inverted, and then they're just like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to do my own thing, and that was really cool to see because they just kept their positive attitude with it, and they did their own funny face here. So this was a whole bunch of different things that compounded, and just like things that I mentioned before, the thin cartoon lines, the V tool, being inverted, all these things. So there's a number of different factors here, but luckily there was only 2 out of the 108 that ended up at this level. So here's just some overview of all the different steps that we went through here with these. So this looks a little bit complicated, and it kind of is, but you can see the percentages there on the left that we already went over. And the bolded percentages past that on each step indicate what amount of students did that step or completed it. So for the A's, everybody completed the trace step, 100% completed the V outline, 97% took all the skin off, and 90% were able to smooth the pumpkin. Inverted, there was only one, or there was 3% that was inverted there. And then more interesting here, you can see the cartoons. So cartoons are indexed much higher there, or much lower rather, for the A's. And as you go to the lesser and lesser grades, the cartoons become more and more. So what that means overall is that we need more animal stencils in the end. And you can see there at the bottom in white, the fail points here for all the different steps. Removing the skin, smooth and inverted, we're all at 19%. But the V outline, that one was the step that 57% of the pumpkins, that was their main fail point. So that's the main thing that we need to work on for next year. So thanks a lot for listening. Have a great day.